in order to have the feeling that we live a fulfilled life, that we are alive with our lives, we do not need, and that's important, we do not need the protection from feeling unwell. We do not need the protection from suffering. We need the protection from feeling meaningless, from feeling disconnected. Love is the active interest in the aliveness of the other. If we are concerned with our ego, we cannot feel love. So if you're afraid, you're concerned with your ego. If you're anxious, you're concerned with your ego. We have put ego on top and love as the servant. Love serves ego. Your quantum physics brings us to the point to understand that everything is one.
Following is a conversation with Andreas Weber. Andreas is a Berlin-based philosopher, book and magazine writer, and independent scholar. He teaches at Leuphana University and at the University of Fine Arts in Berlin. This is Sanjeev Ranjan podcast, and here is Andreas Weber. Hi, Andreas. Welcome to my podcast.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, so first let's discuss about the mental health issue, which we are seeing that it's on peak in these years, and it's increasing every passing year, and now it has become a kind of epidemic. Why it's happening? What has changed in our society, which is pushing us towards mental health issues? Is it our fast-paced life with technological developments or other kind of developments which we are seeing in the world? It is our individualistic society, which is I think relatively new term which has been introduced to society, and that's why people do not feel connected to each other, and that could also lead to mental health issues. So, what are your thoughts on it? What is causing it, and how we can tackle this problem?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this question for starting. And of course, there are many layers of reasons and motives for this. And I can't claim to be somebody who's done a deep sondage of those or deep research on those. But what I can say from my perspective is that these mental health issues and depression and anxiety and even let's say subclinical mental health issue in terms of just feeling deeply frustrated or irritated or confused by what life is for us. They have to do with how our normal human way of finding meaning is distorted in our dominating culture. And when I say finding meaning, then I mean that humans are a cooperative species. We like to be productive part of a productive whole. And when we are this, we feel right. We feel healthy in terms of this basic layer of feeling that I am whole. Maybe we can even say we feel whole when we can, and that's an empirical observation. When we are able to productively provide for a whole that is also productive and that mirrors back on us, that also gives us something, and that doesn't really happen. That's not the situation anymore today. It's very often people are very often they don't know why what the things they do in order to earn their money are actually really used for, and they don't make sense in terms of participating. And of course, many people get less and less back from the world, while only few people get more and more back from the world. And so what I describe, of course, can also be viewed as our participation in life, and our participation in the biosphere is the same thing. We are providing something to it, and we're also getting something from it. So it's a very profound and deep experience. And if you don't experience this, then you don't feel alive. So the problem is you don't feel alive. People don't feel alive. My diagnosis would be, and that's what I wrote about in some books, that our experience of being alive is diminishing and has diminished, and it's not on the radar. We don't really know that actually the lack of aliveness is a fundamental underlying problem. So we're not even aware of this.
Yeah,
How you can go?
yeah.
Yes.
That's very interesting point. Means that makes me think that we have done all the medical technological developments to increase our lifespan,
Mm,
but the question is number of movements we are alive has decreased.
mm,
So probably we are not getting anywhere with these developments when it comes to our lifespan, because the effective number of movements we are alive probably remains the same as before. So previously probably people used to live only for 40 years or less than that, and but they were more alive than us. And right now we live more than around 70 years,
mm,
and but we are less alive, or we are alive for less movement, for less moments of time. And that means overall people who are feeling optimistic about our lifespan, and they should rethink and take this aliveness aspect into consideration.
mm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I like your immediate way of doing a mathematic equation from it. So we could say, okay, the average life expectancy of a male person in Europe is, let's say, about 82 years. And if you only feel 1% alive in these 82 years, it's years you feel alive. And if you live in the Kalahari Desert in a traditional society and you feel alive all the time and you only live to 50, you have a 50-fold higher aliveness feeling. I mean, it's sort of like, it's actually, you cannot compute it like this, but it shows a little bit the problem. And I mean, I don't want to bash the things I'm also using, which help people and which make suffering, less suffering possible. I mean, I'm not against dental anesthetics, and these are also all very important things, of course. But I follow you in the critique of the quantitative approach. Quantity before quality.
I also meant that means I didn't mean it literally
No,
like
no.
that we should not do the medical developments in the medical science. We need it, but I only want to hit that perspective that only
Yep,
living longer is important in terms of
absolutely.
quantity,
Yeah, absolutely.
and not the quality which could be measured by aliveness, liveliness of a person.
Yes. Yeah. No. It's like trying to fix a problem and fixing it at the wrong side of the problem, and not realizing that it's actually, this is not the problem. And if you look, and um, there are also empirical psychological studies to it. You can find them if you look into these people who live in sustenance societies, people living in traditional cultures like in the Kalahari Desert. If you ask them about how happy are they with their life, you will find that they're on average much happier than a person from industrial societies. And I mean, that's a shocking find. And of course, many people from industrial societies, the bulk, nearly everyone would of course say, I would never change with them, I would never swap, I would never do this. But in the end, at the end of the day, we should see that in order to have the feeling that we live a fulfilled life, that we are alive with our lives, we do not need, and that's important, we do not need the protection from feeling unwell. We do not need the protection from suffering. We need the protection from feeling meaningless, from feeling disconnected. And that's very interesting. So it's actually a very deep observation. And the dominating culture has, and there are also reasons, there are, let's say, interests behind this. The dominating culture for a long time has focused on just creating more lifespan until only recently. Now everything somehow seems to topple, but to create more lifespan and then automatically assume that then everything is good. And we haven't really looked at creating more aliveness by remaining much more moderate. That would also be a much more sustainable solution, of course. I mean, if you can be a Kalahari bush person with a zero ecological footprint and be much more happier than somebody who takes 2 or 3 intercontinental flights per year, why? What is the point? What is the point in living like this? And my experience with people who I sometimes lead into experience of nature, or staying in the forest and these things, is that there is this process of these needs of civilizational security somehow falling away in only very short days, and then somehow a sort of glow and a sort of feeling of being carried by something more profound comes up. And it's very difficult often after some days of these experiments, these retreats, to go back into this society. It's very difficult because there's some sort of feeling of, okay, somehow we touched the core of being alive, which is somehow independent of what the conditions of my life are, if I only have it, if I'm only connected to it. And that's in many civilizations, in many old civilizations, it's the most dignified activity of humans, is to remain in contact with the source of life. And only in our civilization, it doesn't even exist. If you ask a scientist, can you tell me something about the source of life, they will look at you and say, this is not part of my discipline. You have to ask whatever, a priest or something. And it doesn't even exist. There's only material fulfillment. And the idea is that if material wishes are fulfilled, we will automatically be happy. But obviously that's not true. We know it. We even know it.
Yeah, and so in this whole probably other people are also aware of this thing, and still they are not able to swap their lifestyle, as you said, with another person who is in Kalahari desert, who is
Yeah.
those people. What is stopping us? Why did meaning in life is decreasing with passing time?
Yeah.
Is that has something to do with all the recent developments, our growth, industrial revolution, technological developments of these recent developments?
Yeah. Thank you. It's a very profound question. And let me just put before, because in order to make myself clear that I don't cause misunderstanding, when I rave about people living in a very modest way and being much more happy with their lives, statistically, empirically, of course, people who live in a desolate and destitute way, and in extreme poverty, and in a situation of being threatened at their lives, and they're losing the elementary human needs, of course they are not what I'm talking about. These are people who are exploited, and who live in a constant trauma, actually. So what I don't want that this is confused with telling that suffering is great. It is not. But a fortification against suffering is also not great, and that's what the others do. So now I'm coming to your question, and yeah, I would say that the cultural fashion of our times, which goes back quite a bit, several hundred years, and even thousands of years, several thousand years in Europe, in the old world. The cultural fashion is to think that humans are separate from the rest of the world, and that the rest of the world is a dead thing. And this is a description of the cosmos which is relatively unique. Normally, cultures always draw huge lines of continuity between humans and what humans do, and the source of a sort of cosmic source of life-giving powers. And in our culture, we have stopped to do this. We have even systematically, philosophically eradicated attempts to do this. So it's a fashion you have to follow, to think yourself as somehow alone and separate in a world which is somehow alien to us. And if you live in this situation, if you're alone and separate in an alien world, then actually the logical thing to do is to build a wall around you, to put food and water inside, and to defend it against others, because everything is so hostile and alien. So we have to somehow fend for our lives, and that's the connected philosophy. The philosophy, I would call it the philosophy of war, actually. That We are alone in this bleak earth, which is dead and which is not interested in our presence. We're actually not needed, we're not wanted, and we have to defend our existence. And in this situation, you stop being generous at all, because you think, I have to take this, I have to be prepared for worse time, for times which are worse. But I obviously think that the world is not like this. So it's actually a tragical error about the character of the world, which happened at some point in antiquity, in Greece maybe, or even earlier. I don't know why. It's a good question. Why did people shift this? Why did a welcoming world, which gives life, why did this world somehow go away in our perception, and it became this hostile, a terrible world in which everything is always at war? And if everything is always at war, and you think everything is always at war, you're also always at war, and you're fighting against everything. And we can see this in the dominating civilization. It fights life, it fights one another, fight is everywhere, and competition, and all these things. But I really think it's a form of blindness.
Yeah, interesting point. Why they are just competing with each other, or why we have such a kind of economic structure which promotes competition rather than harmony and wealth for everyone, a
Mm,
fair wealth for everyone.
mm,
Mm,
yeah.
mm, Means even if somebody gets more wealth than other people and they are unhappy, then why not governments are recognizing it and somehow trying to focus on happiness of their citizens,
Yeah.
rather than just going with this capitalist economy and promoting this competition
Mm.
indirectly, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's also very complex. It's a very complex history of our economical thinking and the history of capitalism. But just to draw some bold lines, of course, capitalism is the way you distribute stuff when you think that you and your fellow some other humans, one has to say, you and some other humans are the only real agents in a dead world. Then capitalism is the logical outcome. Then there's stuff lying around. You have to secure as much as you can for yourself, and it's always scarce. And then capitalism somehow automatically springs from this. So I would say capitalism is an outcome of the idea that the world consists of objects, and humans are somehow a strange exception. We are also objects in a way. Capitalism, or this dualistic, it's the philosophical world would be dualism. The dualism thinks, but we're also, obviously, we're subjects. We can decide. We have agency. So there's this strange enigma in the middle. But I would say it comes with a certain view on the world. So, and then historically, of course, those who had more than others were interested in propagating the system, because they would just keep their wealth, and and even make it more ingrained, make it less changeable. And there was a time starting in the late 1960s in the West and in the United States, particularly when the civil rights movement really seemed to be able to gain the upper hand and actually go into the direction that you suggested, to decrease personal wealth. Then wealthy people came together and said, we have to fight this. We have to fight this development, and we have to fund think tanks who distribute the story that capitalism is inevitable if everybody wants to stay well. And that was a big movement. And there are interesting books written on this. And then their biggest success was when the government of Ronald Reagan came in the States, and of Margaret Thatcher in the UK. So then was capitalism became politics became identified with capitalism. So there wasn't. What I want to say is there's a particular interest of a particular group of people to do this, because they were afraid of losing some of their stuff. So it's a culture. So it's not human nature, It's not human nature manifesting, because in the 500,000 years of human existence, this was not the form of organizing distribution of life. It's very, very new. So humans have the choice. It's culture, it's not nature, and it could also be different. And I mean, I'm also, when I look at these at these numbers, which show that ever fewer people have more and more, then I also think, can we just cap it somehow at some reasonable level? I mean, it's okay if somebody has more than me, even much more, but not crazy much more, not, but it's practically very difficult to do it. Like
Yeah.
it's theoretically, but like, how do you do it? If you do it as one single country, if one single country did it, then it would just be bought up, or it would just be invaded by other countries. So it's practically, no idea. Maybe it's a dead end street. It's possible. Cloud development.
Probably it's something for economists and some other people like governments and leaders to think about, brainstorm together to figure out whether there is a possibility to change it somehow. So point is that if all the countries are able to recognize it, all the governments of the country are able to understand that it's the real problem, it's the real problem which is in the core of many other problems,
Yeah.
and fixing that will going to help them with solving other social problems, then there could be some possibility that they could agree for some new economic structure.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I completely agree. There remains the practical question, because some players, if we look at the players on the world stage, even if some countries might join, but some players will just not do this. They will just not want to do this. So how practical is that? And that's when I paint this bleak picture, it's about practicality. The interesting thing is that if you ask people, then they agree that actually, if we could make a sort of maximum monthly income, so in Europe, how much should this be? And then you can do some sophisticated sort of sondages, empirical research, and then people actually, there's a majority of people. I've been part in this once. We've done this with a huge group of like 350 students at Berlin Arts University, and actually people settle on a reasonable span. It's very interesting to see, like 80% settle on maybe maximum 10,000 euros a month or something. That's enough. It's kind of a lot already, I would say. You're well off if you have this, but not 10 millions or 100 millions a month. And actually, there's a huge majority who's for this. So you would think, why can't this be a political goal which you offer in a democratic system? And that's actually interesting. Nobody does this, although you can easily find that if you have a group of, I mean, these were maybe a little bit biased because there were students as in arts university, but it was a very big collective. But still, politicians don't do it, because then all these corporations, they will start their loud screams and cries, and the lobbying world work. And but I mean, it should be doable. And when I was younger, that's what I wanted to say when I interrupted you before. When I was younger, in the 70s, there was still this heritage of social democratic thinking, that of course you have to level the difference between the poorest and the richest. That was like normal policy. But for some reason it has just vanished. It's not even there as a goal. It's not even there anymore, because somehow many people think it's sort of, people resign in thinking it's impossible. Like in the Middle Ages, people in Europe resigned and they thought just kings are somehow created by God, and it's impossible. You cannot do anything. You have to resign. And to me, it seems that right now many people just resign and thinking, okay, there are some people who have billions, and they have even more billions and more billions, and this is just how it is. But it's not. It's a culture. The culture decides this.
True.
Yeah, very interesting. So you see, we're deep in politics, and it's it's what comes. What is the end result is that we're living in a very loveless world, in a very heartless world. in a world without heart, in a world without warmth, in a terrible world. It is such a terrible world. I have kids, grown-up kids in their 20s, in their early 20s. And when I'm talking with them, and you're kind of like not much older than they actually, and I talk to them and they're depressed. Like your first question was about the mental health thing. And they're not clinically mentally ill, but they're totally depressed when we talk about the state of the world or the future. And they look at me. My son doesn't want to talk about it because it's too depressing to talk about this with me. And my daughter just rolls her eyes and says, "Of course, it's all messed up. What can come? It's terrible to be young but it's not because it's inevitable. It's because some people with interests don't want it to change. It's not because human nature is like this or because we're locked in. It's just there's a push to keep going, and people pay with their mental health. Of course, they pay with their mental health because they just can't be part of a living circle of receiving gifts and giving. And so that's also a lack of love, a profound lack of love.
Yeah, so how do you define love?
Hey, that's fantastic. It never happened in a podcast that somebody asked me, because I define it. I actually quote. Let me do it.
How
Let me define it. I like it. So I'm just really, it's because we can define it, and the average dominating cultural answer would be, well, love is, it's a private affair. It's not definable, but of course you can define it. And I follow the definition done by Erich Fromm, the Swiss psychologist, and or was he German? He lived in Switzerland the end of his life. The psychologist who observed that love is the active interest in the aliveness of the other. That's love. The active interest in the aliveness of the other. And
very nice definition.
wonderful.
And that also proves our previous point, which we discussed at the start of our conversation, that there is less aliveness in the world currently.
Yes.
And now you said there is less love in the world, and both kind of connects now, as you are saying that the definition of love itself says that if there is less love, then less aliveness.
Yes. Yeah, they're intimately connected. And caring for aliveness of someone, it means to love. So love is the active interest in the aliveness of the other. And it's actually an activity, you see. It's an activity. It is connected with beautiful feelings, but the beautiful feelings themselves are not the love. It has a dimension of feeling, but the true depth of love is action, is what you're doing. This is when everyone, every listener, and you, of course, you can take this wonderful sentence by Erich Fromm, and you can check your love relationships. You can check it. You can check, does this person have an active interest in my aliveness? Like in nearly all cases. Or because it's easy that somebody tells you, but I love you so, and there's only the huge feeling of need, and there's no active interest in my aliveness. So this is really a great litmus test for checking if there's actually true love, which needs to be active. And
Is it true that you do not do love to somebody, but you are love? So
yes,
people are love, they feel loving, and then they spread whomsoever they meet in a loving way. As so, if you are loving, then and then of course your whole perspective towards life and everything around you is loving, and so one does not need another person in order to feel love. What do you think about this?
yeah, I completely agree. And nobody knows. It's a good secret. It's nice we talk about it because not so many people know. And it's not trivial. And it's there's a Sufi saying. That goes that when you truly love, you do not exist. Only love exists. That's the same thing. It's not something you have. It's not something you somehow. It's not an object. It's not something. it's not a color you put into your emotional cosmos. It is a force. It is a life creating force. And if you behave in the interest of somebody else's aliveness, or even in the interest of life itself, then you become an instrument of this force. So actually you step back and you become this force manifesting through you. So I completely agree. And the interesting thing, and now we come back to your first questions about leaving, not being able to live a meaningful life anymore in our mainstream society. The interesting thing is, and that's also something people often don't know, the interesting thing is that you feel great when you become love. You feel really great, but in a way that you didn't expect, because it's a different grade than when you love in terms of, oh, there's somebody who has something which I don't have, and and I want this, and so if this person stays with me, then I also have this and I feel great. But that's a very different grade. That's the needy grade. That's the narcissistic grade, which only lasts very short time. But if you manage to follow the pull of a life-giving universe, and you become this love, then you feel a profound meaningfulness, which is not about you. It's not about your ego. It's about the world in which we are. I mean, parents know this about their love to their children because that's their role. And I mean, there are also many toxic relationships between parents and children, of course. But that's the sort of base model, that you know that you need to act in the interest of this person who cannot act in their own interests in many respects, and you have to make it happen, and to have to help them to act in their interest. And that's a profound love. And this love is lacking in our world, and the satisfaction and the beauty and the intoxication, I would even say, and the sacredness of being in this love, that's lacking in our culture, and that's horrible. And people miss it, and they don't even know that they miss it. They think they miss some pleasure or some whatever, some consumerist act, but they miss this. And if you have this, then you can go through hardships, because it's actually not important. It's important that you feed life with your activities. That's a profound pleasure, a pleasure of the heart, a pleasure of the soul, a pleasure of the life-giving life in you. And that's right for humans. That's deep culture, actually. And we forgot it. Our culture completely forgot it. This source isn't even there. We haven't it. We don't have it. It's terrible. It's really
Do you
traumatizing.
think that it has to do again with all the recent developments in the society or in the world? Because at any moment we can only feel one emotion. So if we are anxious, then we cannot feel love. If we are depressed, we cannot feel love. If we are restless, we cannot feel love.
Mm.
And all the social structure, all this competitive society and capitalist economy, all our surrounding environment, economical or social environment, and all of these are just automatically pushing us towards in that direction, without us realizing why we are feeling like so.
Mm.
So probably in the past, when people were more connected to each other, and they were more close to nature, they did not have that much fragmentation in the society. They do not used to see somebody, oh, he's richer than him, so they do not used to do that much comparison.
Mm.
And when a fragmentation or comparison comes in the picture, love goes away, and anxiety and all other bad kind of feelings comes in the picture, comes in our life. What do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Of course, 100% agree. I like this. I like this statement that you say, when actually I would sharpen it even more. I would even say, make it more radical, what you said. And I would say, if we are concerned with our ego, we cannot feel love. So if you're afraid, you're concerned with your ego. If you're anxious, you're concerned with your ego. If you feel vulnerable, you're concerned with your ego. If you feel that you might not succeed, or you might not be the best, or your neighbor might have more money, you're always concerned with your ego, and then you cannot feel love. You cannot act as love. That's the problem. That's the problem. So if we concentrate on these ego needs, we can never be truly satisfied, because humans can only be truly satisfied, like truly deeply satisfied, when they act as an instrument of love. Only then you can truly be satisfied. So actually, this whole ego thing, which drives the world industry, can never ever really satisfy anybody, and people are lucky that in between they also find little crumbs of love activity. They are able to do this. So that's where the satisfaction comes from. It's really, really chilling, actually.
Is there a world possible without ego? Because people say ego is required in order to drive the world, in order to do progress in the world, in order to move, to bring changes and those kind of things. So if for any movement ego provides that kind of energy, do you think that there is some middle ground we can find in between ego and love to balance both of them, and then we have both development and growth also in the society, and fulfillment and satisfaction and peace also in the mind of people?
Yeah. Yeah, we need to get the hierarchy right. So ego cannot be the boss. Ego needs to be the servant. Of course we need ego. I mean, we're incarnations. We're individuals. We're embodiments. Like every organism is an individual. So we need our individual capacities, actually, but we need them in order to contribute to a living reality, to a flourishing biosphere. So we need this. So ego needs to serve love. It needs to be the ego smartness, our agency, our inventiveness, all the human special faculties, our technology, and everything we can do. We need to put this in the service of our life-giving desires. So that's the right sequence. We cannot put ego on. If ego becomes the boss, as it is in our culture, you can walk in a bookstore in the airport and find like 5 meters of bookshelves with self-help books, how to make your ego bigger and stronger. You find a lot of books like how to succeed in life. So if we put ego on top, we have just toppled it. We have put ego on top, and love as the servant. Love serves ego. We go around and we swipe through Tinder and we look for somebody who will provide our ego with love. Yeah, that's just the wrong way. It's just put like we need to put this whole thing on its feet again. Of course, I'm not sometimes have these discussions, of course, because I'm so much encouraging to let go of our strong ego identification. And then people come to me and say, yeah, but there are these mystical traditions and they want to kill the ego, and that's a great suffering, and that's crazy, and it really feels bad. And I don't want to put it like this. I don't want to destroy ego. And I don't even want to suggest that we need to get rid of all our desires and all our pleasures. Not at all. We only need to turn it around in the way that our individual powers are serving a life-giving reality. That's just enough. And that's the dominating culture does just the contrary, and it's not going anywhere, as we see.
Yeah, true. How is this ego formed?
Yeah.
So how we get identified with ego, how this ego is formed at the first place itself, and how this ego then translates to several social, economical and other kind of problems in the world.
Yeah, wonderful.
Even environmental problem I would also like to touch, how climate change is also related to ego.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So yeah. So on one hand, so what I in this shorthand call ego, so the identification with my personal biographical identity, and you could even say more about it, but let's take just this shorthand. So from coming from one side, this obviously is inevitable because I am an individual or organic entity, and so it's there. So it's important to see that there is something which then can be the servant of something productive, and it has in its own logic, I would say, at least in humans, it has the temptation, the possibility, because we're free to decide. There's the possibility to let it grow and to protect ourselves from what is necessary in the end, from gifting ourselves to the greater whole, at least through at the end of our lives we become a gift to the greater whole. So the ego somehow at some points asks, couldn't it be different actually if I just become bigger and bigger and I start to dominate, and maybe I will just be eternal? There's a little inbuilt temptation in if we are human. And if you look at traditional cultures, then they have very sophisticated mechanisms to tame this ego. So there are cultural practices to tame the ego, not the ego, there are not practices by which powerful people tame their slaves. There are practices, very democratic, very, very egalitarian practices in which original societies tame the egos of their members, which can be kind of tough. I can give you some examples. And for example, if a Kalahari person comes back with their prey, and then the prey has to be shared, everybody gets a piece. Like it's a collective action, and then they're not putting him on a pedestal and saying, you're such a great hunter, you're so wonderful, you're such a powerful person. Instead they mock him. Instead they say, this antelope, this is smaller than a fly, with people like you being our hunters, we will starve. And he's actually humiliated. And then if you ask them why they do this, they say, because we don't want his ego to become so big that he is starting to become a dictator. So there are cultural practices. So the ego is something that's important to see, which needs to be culturally tamed, just skyrocket. And so that's the ego is there. It needs to be tamed. It needs to be in the right place, which is the servant for a life-giving universe, or a servant for a life-giving practice of togetherness, the service to give life to your family or whatever, to your garden, in your job, whatever you choose. And the problem in our civilization is that we like we already talked about, is that we have turned it around, and the ego is the goal. The ego is not the instrument. The ego is the goal. If you look anywhere, and this is why you find so many incredibly narcissistic people in top positions, because in a system in which the ego is a goal, if you have a mental health problem in which your ego is your goal, you find yourself in top positions automatically, which is terrible, because you will not be able to make decisions which are sacrifices for yourself because they serve love. You will never be able to do it if your ego is your goal. You will always only serve your ego, and we're surrounded by these people. They're everywhere on top.
So how ego get translated to several problems in the society?
Yeah.
How strong identification with ego eventually creates a lot of problem in the society,
Mm.
and how we can create a kind of detachment
Mm.
from ego, or less identification with ego. How we can do that? Probably that's the solution
Yeah.
for most of the problems in the world, uh, because we can see we are pouring, governments are pouring, some companies are also pouring big amount of money in solving a lot of problems, climate change, a lot of social problems, depression, anxiety, and they are really working on the top level. But I do not see a lot of work at the grass root level. There is not a lot of work there.
Mm.
And at the grassroots level, as we discuss, it's identification with the ego. Strong identification with the ego is the main cause of it.
Mm.
So my question is that, first, to enlighten us about how ego translates to most of the social problems, and second, how we can decrease this strong identification with our ego to solve problems on the bigger level. And so that people like governments or companies who will be watching this podcast, they will have a new direction to put their money in a more effective way to solve social problems, because they fix this ego, strong detachment to ego, then automatically many problems in the world will automatically get solved sooner or later. That's what I believe.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. You know, I really like it that we somehow make a bridge, build a bridge, or you build a bridge between ancient Indian spirituality and modern contemporary politics in capitalism. Because, you know, in ancient Indian philosophy, of course, the ego is it's a let's say a spiritual challenge. It's a spiritual problem, you know, because ego identification means that you will go on to suffer, because you will I mean, you see, it's really a mirror image of what we have been talking about, just by doing a political analysis of coarse type, but I think still valid. You suffer because you suffer if you identify with your ego, because your ego is not real. It is not really real. It is not really your center. It is some kind of shell. It is a servant, and if you identify with this, you will suffer. And then you have to learn, if you want to go this path of realization, that you have actually to de-identify, and you have to serve something more deeply and more profound, which is actually giving you life and making you feel wonderful, if you find this. So how, and I mean, I really love your analysis that incredible amounts of money are poured into the strategies of solutions which work really on the top level, so which work only on the symptoms, and never on the causes, never on the roots, the grassroots. And I really agree with this. And it's like going full throttle with your parking brake. Fully pull your parking brake. You know, your motor is rotating, and you're not really getting anywhere, and your car will overheat and burn at some point. And yeah, I mean, it's important to say, so trying an answer, it's important to say that what we are discussing here should not be, there should be no thought of abusing it in terms of starting to tell poor and struggling people that they just have to let go of their ego and everything will be fine, while the rich people who are in command enjoy their ego and their narcissism. This is not the way to go. And I mean, it's not even possible. I mean, if in this long preliminary I forgot your two, can you just shortly repeat the two questions you had again to bring me back on track? You had two questions, actually.
Yes, sure. So, first question was, of course, you already answered it. How ego creates several social problems,
Yes. Okay.
and as you mentioned, ego is not reality, and that anything which is illusion, and we are attached to the illusion, then we are going to suffer, of course. And how I see that this thing, like. If we are highly identified with some ego or some special identity, like, oh, I'm from this country or I'm from this family, and my responsibility is only towards my family or only towards my near and dear ones, or to max to my country, and not towards whole world. And that creates fragmentation, and wherever there is fragmented, love cannot exist. And then the second question was, how we can help people in detaching from this ego, how
Yes.
how
Okay.
how we can help them to get less identified with the ego.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think for me, you summarized it in a very nice way, actually. And I'm really seeing into things I didn't really think through, and we can actually spot the big flaw in the whole communistic project, you know, because that was the redistribution of material wealth, and that was still identified with ego. You know, it was just redistributed, and it went wrong. So, you know, if you say, hey, capitalism can't go on, and then people tell you communism didn't work, so we don't have any choice. But it was still identified with the idea that we need to build a fortress around our egos in this bleak and dead world of objects. So if we and then we are in a vicious circle, and you described this vicious circle so well. So then you kill aliveness, and then there's even less aliveness, so you need even better walls and better bunkers and better fortification, and you need to be even less loving to others, because it's a vicious circle. And I would say in our times, in our very, very heartless times, actually, it is just the vicious circle becomes deeper and deeper, and we're going around quicker and quicker, and we see an ecological breakdown and climate change that, like, even like the stuff is really becoming scarce, and some people are just reaping everything, and they put it into their bank accounts and their cellars, and nothing remains for it. And these people try to get the last money from poor people. So it becomes actually, the problem is that at some point, of course, you really, if you really, your basic ability to live a human life is menaced, then of course you have to fight for it. I mean, I said this before, because you want to live, and you have the right to live. You're an individual. You're a gift of this creation, and we are at this point right now, and it makes everything worse, and it gives even less space of maneuver for the idea that we actually don't need all this, because everything is so urgent, and everything is so scarce, and everything is, we know it. We go into a shop, and the coffee that yesterday cost only €4 today costs €5, and we walk out and say, no, I won't do this again. So I will take my coffee at home. And so that's actually a vicious circle, which somehow then takes a reason of its own, and it will lead to conflict, and we already see conflict. So now we're at the bleak picture again. Yeah. So
Can we use technology to solve this?
yeah, I mean, technology is always, technology is like the ego. It's a servant. So of course we can use it. And I mean, the technology we're using to have this nice talk is part of the solution, I would say.
Yeah. So if I rephrase my question, can we tell our servant technology to serve the master, which is love? So can we use technology to spread love, or can we use technology to help people get less identified with their ego, or to have less attachment with their strong identity? By identity I mean, like, oh, okay, I'm part of this family, and it's my responsibility towards my family that I have to care for them, and I have to provide them, and for my country also I have to be always ready to fight for my country, or always be in protective mode for my country. And then comes the world, and these are different identities, and from social side also there are different identities, or the roles which is expected from us. Oh, you need to behave in this way in this society, you have to behave in this way in another country, in another society.
Mhm.
And there are so many conditioning,
Mhm.
social conditioning and family conditioning, and those conditioning, that we forget that those things were just created to make our life easier, but those are not the real things. Those are still our own rules, those are not real. So we should not affect our mental health or
Mhm.
physical health by identify by getting strongly identified with those roles. So how we can develop this understanding that these are just some roles which are given to us, and we have to play it in a good way, but we should not assume that that role is me.
Yeah.
uh, we are different from those roles, we are and we just put up different roles. So can technology be used to help us in understand this big picture, that do not take things so seriously, these are just roles, play it well, and then your time will come and you have to go away from the world when you die. And apart from technology, what other things we can use? Because there are already many spiritual leaders or motivational speakers, they are trying to do these things, but I do not see it very effective, because reach of those people are only to the millions of people, and only technology can reach to billions of people, to most of the people in the world. And it will keep on increasing with technological developments in less developed countries like Africa or others. So technology is the most effective way to change this. That's how I see. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Now it's very helpful how you put this and how you summarize this. And I know that is your heart's project actually to help doing this. And yeah, so I'm absolutely convinced that technology can be of huge help here, of course, like really convinced. And it can be of huge help here if we use it as an instrument, and if we don't think it's the master, if it's an instrument, if it's helping. And that means, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, means that there need to be some preconditions which would need to be changed. I really want to stress that this podcast we are having is an example for helping access debates or talks or conversations about this on an egalitarian level for everyone worldwide. Everybody can watch this, and you need to pay a little bit for having your mobile with internet, but it's not a lot of money. And then there's no barrier, you can just watch it. And I'm giving seminars on video platforms with participants on the whole world, and it's a very moving thing. I just today came from the last session of a seminar in which we invited participants to sit with local water bodies, with local rivers and lakes, and to develop a sort of personal relationship to them, like people in traditional cultures do. And it was just people from everywhere in the world. There were people from Australia and people from the US and people from South America. And these things are, so you see, this has a huge pull towards the experience of oneness, and there's somebody on the screen sharing their heart with yours, and it moves you like profoundly. And you don't know one another, you're so far away, because your heart essentially is the same. So yeah, of course it can be done, but the environment. So now the environment today, of course, favors, because it is so geared towards profit, and it's so there are these monopolies, and the model today is geared towards TikTok videos, which which don't help, or which are even contrarian. And because technology is somehow profoundly enmeshed with the way of financing it, and I mean, maybe it can't be differently. So there's somehow this enmeshed and entangled conglomerate of technology, and hey, let's earn even more money, let's even get some more money. And so that's a problem, but it's not a problem of technology. It's the problem of putting ego first, so this needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with your point that currently we are using technology to connect people, but in a wrong way. And we could use the same technology to connect people in a right way,
Yeah.
to make them take a wiser decision in their life, to feel more loved, and to be able to spread more love, and to be able to get a little bit distance from their strong identities which they have hold very close to them, and that's going to help them with their anxiety and depression and mental health issues, when they will see, oh, the thing to which they are clinging on, and which and they are feeling sadness, that's just illusion, that's not real, that's just an illusion. They are just playing role in this world, which we can compare to cinema. And their time will come when they have to stop playing roles. So they have to just play different roles here, and it's not their actually, they are not those roles, they are not that ego, they are not that those identities, they are distance from those identities, because when they were born they were still existed as a life, but they did not had any identity. But with passing time they keep on accumulating different identities, and then by mistake they misunderstood those identities as themselves. So if they can develop this kind of understanding, then they will be less affected by all the things going in their environment. They will
Yeah.
perceive it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. And it's, yeah. And I mean, we put it before, personal ego it doesn't need to be dissolved. It needs to come second, as you say, it needs to be seen as there is some essence in myself which lies below this. And this is a way of, it's a sort of suit, it's a sort of role, it's a sort of clothing, but there's something which is below this, and which is actually, which everybody has and every being has, and which can be shared, and which can be spread, and which can be grown, and which is actually beautiful and wonderful if we do this and if we grow it. And that's the true feeling of satisfaction, and everything else just comes as a tool for this. And yeah, so that's, I 100% agree. So we somehow need to, what we get in these modern societies is, somebody has some teacher has called it's somebody training. You need to become somebody, and you need to be super good at it and better than other somebodies. But in the end, it's just training the wrong thing. We need to train the universal part, which is the part which can be happy, which is the part which can be blissed. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's very important to look into ways to distribute this in
Yeah, and just to add one point to that, if somehow we can use technology to say to prove to people or to give them a monitoring tool, see, these are just the conditioning. What you are saying, it involves this social conditioning. It can involve this country conditioning. So before taking any decision or to form any opinion or perspective about anything, please take this chart, interactive chart, into account, which will show
Mm.
that that your thought involves how much social conditioning or family conditioning or country conditioning or other kind of biases. If somehow that monitoring tool could be developed and presented to normal public, they will be already at one step ahead in handling it. They will start at least understanding the problem,
Mm.
and unless they do not understand the problem, they can't solve it. So first step is probably for them to understand that yes, there is something going wrong with the thought process, yes, something going wrong with how they perceive the world. And if we could somehow do that realization using technology, then billions of people can feel the change, can realize it, and can at least understand the problem. So that means, if I try to put it in few words, then bringing wisdom to technology can somehow help in solving this deep rooted identity problem or ego problem. Because for me, wisdom is just to be able to perceive the whole situation. Like when we take a decision, for example, if we use our analytical mind, then we only take consideration of few perspective, or we think about things from few directions, not all the directions, and not as a whole. What's going to be its second degree impact, third degree impact. And to me, wisdom is just to be able to see any situation in its whole, not from a specific perspective, but to able to perceive it's what it is in its essence, and to be able to perceive all its impact from its second degree, third degree impact, and wider impact. And it's more kind of intuition. Many times it, you just know it's right, and it just fits, and then we just see its result, that yeah, it does mostly good, and we do not know how we come to that intuition, but it's somewhere inbuilt in our essence or in our collective consciousness. So what are your thoughts on this?
Mm. Yeah, I like your the idea. or your definition even, that wisdom is gaining a picture of the complex situation without the blindness of a particular interest of it. I really like this. I would try to somehow connect it to love again. And
Yes.
I would say wisdom is a deep insight into the nature of reality and my role to play in this reality. So it's also about balancing my role in this reality with the reality as a total. And I mean, when you say wisdom and we're talking about love, then I remember a quote from something my teacher, my biological and philosophical teacher, Francisco Varela, once said. And he said, science is knowledge, religion is knowledge, art is knowledge. There's only one wisdom, and that is love. So again, we are there. So in the older traditions, we have an organ, we have a sense organ for wisdom, which is the heart. The heart is what knows what is true and what knows what needs to be done. And it knows when I say wisdom is love, or I follow my teacher and I say wisdom is love. When we understand that we are living in a life-giving universe, in a life-giving reality, then wisdom means to always understand that this life-giving reality desires to give us life, and if we want to contribute to it, we need to give life. So it's a circle. We receive something, and it's a circle. We give something, and that's profound wisdom in my experience. Or you could even cut it shorter. You could say, if you want a wise decision in a given situation, you have a given situation and you don't know how to manage. You could ask, and that's not from me, it's also from somebody whose name I forgot. How would love decide? How would love decide? How would love decide? And then you get a glimpse into wisdom, because love, so you see, I added a little bit to your wonderful definition. So love takes into account the global situation. It doesn't come from an ego perspective. It doesn't come from the interest in an individual, but it comes from the non-ego identified interest of spreading life, of giving as much life as is possible, and that's wisdom. It's also connected to wisdom is free of fear. If you're fearing, you will not see some solutions because you're afraid of them, so you don't see them. And then many people suffer from knowing what their problem is but not wanting to see it, and then then they just run around in circles. So wisdom doesn't fear, because it is in an alliance with love. And so that's what I would say. That's what I would add to your wonderful picture.
Yeah. Thanks very much for adding to my definition of wisdom, and that also prove the point that wisdom is what help help us in putting love as a master and ego as a slave, as a servant in our mind. So only a wise person can put love first and ego second in priority.
Yes. Yeah. It's very nice. Yeah. So it somehow came back to us. Yes. Very nice. Yes.
Yeah, and that's different from intelligence. Intelligence
Mhm.
tell us to put ego first,
Yeah.
or our identity first, and just achieve some narrow goals without understanding how it's going to impact other things, without understanding its second or third degree impact. But wisdom is able to show
Yeah.
us a complete picture, a holistic picture, and to be able to understand the impact of our action on the whole, or on everything else in the world. If we are trying to solve one problem in the world, for example using technology, is it going to create 10 other problems? So just to be able to see this holistic picture of interdependence or interconnectedness of everything, that how impacting one thing can badly or positively impact other parts, that ability itself is probably wisdom.
Yeah. I really like this. I can't really add much on what you say, because I really like this elaborate way of putting this. And I'm just, if we just follow the line of this conversation, and then it's a little bit like, intelligence stands to wisdom, like ego stands to love. So intelligence is the servant, and of course we need it. I mean, we need it. We cannot throw it away. We need lots of it. But it needs to be the servant. It cannot be just, just you need to be intelligent. That's not enough. You need a goal. You need a it's more than a goal. You need a deep moving force which makes sense. That's what you need. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's yeah, wonderful. I mean, I really agree. I really agree. But we're talking about these categories, but normally people don't. And even if you use the word wisdom, at least in this culture, people will look at you in a little strange way. Like, this is somehow old fashioned. Are you talking? This is somehow outdated. If you talk about intelligence, it's totally okay. But if you say wisdom, I remember once I gave a talk, and afterwards there was an elderly professor of philosophy, and he said to me in a disproving way, so it was not a compliment. He said, "This sounds like an ancient law of wisdom." It was like, "You don't do this nowadays anymore. This is out of style. We're not in it. We're not in a time of wisdom anymore. We don't need it anymore. We've understood that we can't have it or anything, but it's important in the terms you framed it, right?"
Exactly, and as people say, it's only ancient, but the new physics, the quantum physics, it's very new version of physics, and it's kind of proving our
Mm,
ancient philosophy or spirituality around wisdom.
mm,
Means right now we just talked about what is wisdom. It's like wholeness of thing, to be able to perceive things whole as a whole, and and perceive us as a part of that whole. And that's also connected to, or that also confirms like oneness of the universe. Like we all are interconnected. If we touch or impact one part, then there is going to be some or more impact on other parts also, later or sooner. And that's what quantum physics theories like entanglement and some other theories of quantum physics kind of proof, and that we all are one, and duality in the world is only required to work, to be able to function in the world. Like duality we can relate with ego,
mm,
and oneness we can relate with love. So
mm.
we can say we all are connected via love, and we need ego just to function in the world, to have everything moving in the world, progress and doing anything. But that's an action. When it comes to feeling, we all are one, and we are all one because and we are connected.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with what you say. And it's so you could, based on physical observation and physical calculation, even we come to the conclusion that reality is one. So that means, that I'm not part of reality, but if reality is one, then I am this one in one of its configurations speaking. So if this is one, and that's how far some quantum physicists go. And again, they actually touch very ancient philosophical um, attitudes and arguments and observations. And if we so obviously, if we when I was talking about the heart as our organ of seeing into truth, then the heart is that dimension in our knowing which operates as the one. And I mean, I'm just a scientist here. If the result of interpreting the givings, the given the data, the calculations, the reasoning of quantum physics brings us to the point to understand that everything is one. It means that I am this one. I'm speaking as this one. I cannot. It's not that everything is one and I am part of this one. So if everything is one, I am also this one. But I am this one in its let's say self-vision, which then again is like you said before when we were talking about ego, which is actually ultimately an illusion. It's ultimately not really the last truth. And the heart is the place where this oneness is experienced. So that's also, if I can see with this oneness, which I am actually, then of course I can see into truth, because I am it to some, I am it, only that it's not fully transparent to myself. And all these old spiritual traditions have tried to train those who follow the path of realization to perceive from this plane of oneness. So it's a human capacity to do this, or it might even be a
Yeah,
capacity, it's a capacity of the one to perceive itself from the inside. And the heart is the place where we can do this. This is why the Sufis say that your heart is as big as the universe, because there's a
mhm.
point in which you are this universe in your individual manifestation. But that's the point. And we need to act from this point. And then we know that the universe is a life-giving universe. And then we also know, and so many people who desperately strive for enlightenment following some old spiritual tradition, we also know that it is an absolutely amazing, wonderful experience to touch the heart, to touch this point where we understand ourselves, not in a rational manner, but as a profound state of being, of understanding, of awareness, which is also a state of existing, that this is our home, this is our place, this is the place we can understand, we can help, we can nourish. And on the other side, it's clearly provable by quantum mechanics. It's wonderful, actually. So we really have two accesses to this. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, true. And probably if people can just realize this fact that we are one, that's solution to most of the problem in the world. All the fragments, all the identities, all the egos, whatever conditioning they acquired from society or country or family, everything will be just shattered, because then they will accept whole world as part of themselves,
Yeah.
like they do for their family as part of themselves. They will start doing whole world as part of themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as it has always been in the older cultures, to truly realize this is not a path for everyone, because it also involves a lot of focusing, a lot of like, but I mean, realizing this a little bit, in the shape of how a culture is built, that actually this is the most wonderful and the most loving and the most important perspective, that would already do the trick. We don't need, and I think it won't be realized that everybody walks deeply into the park of realization, but it is enough when humans just shift their perspective to the heart and start to act from the heart, and in order to receive this intoxicating energy, and then it will grow on itself.
Yeah, and just for the information to audience, that we are talking about this oneness proved by quantum physics, based on the book written by Henrik Pasch from Germany. And he kind of tried to prove that everything is one, and this oneness theory using different principles of quantum physics. So if you guys want to go deep into that, I will attach a link at the description of this video, and using that you can refer to the book, and you can go deep into that. So
Um,
yeah, just coming back to this oneness, one very practical thing I want to add here, because people generally perceive things when it sounds more practical.
mm,
So one example of oneness I would like to give, that many times we say something and the other people who are listening to it, it just feels right to them.
mm,
Oh, it's right, means it feels like, yeah, this is it, this is the truth, means they do not judge our that thought, what we convey to them. Many times it happens. So somewhere deep down in their heart or
mm,
in their essence, they already know what truth is.
mm,
And
mm,
that shows that we are all one. Otherwise, why that thing is perceived in the same way, without any questioning, without any doubt, from people who have different outlooks toward world or world affairs, means. And that we see many times whenever a motivational speaker is speak, there are always some sentences which is perceived as it is,
mm.
and in the same way by most of the audience. And that's only possible if we are connected somehow, on some level. If there is only one thing which is guiding all of us, which knows what is right and what is not right, and that does not have very clear definition of right and wrong. It's just a feeling. It just feels right and it just feels wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would add an example to this from a particular way to connect our conflict actually in relationships, which was developed by the psychologist Marshall Rosenberg, and he called it nonviolent communication. And I have some experience with this, and that's actually, so you, let's say maybe a couple, you have a conflict, you have conflicting interests, you have one is continuously disappointed, the other is whatever, bored, or feels somehow attacked. So all these different ways of conflicts, and his strategy to solve this, or to actually to let it solve itself from alone, is that the two or several parties in this conflict need to try, and this needs some training, they need to try to go to their true feelings and to feeling their true needs, like their needs on the human level, which are needs about their themselves, which are not accusations and judgments about the other. You wouldn't express a need in terms of, you always talk when I want to say something. That's not a need, that's an accusation. But the need would be, I crave I crave that my heart is touched by somebody else when I want to express an intimate truth about myself. That's a need. That would be a need. And the interesting thing is, and that's also empirically observable, the interesting thing is that when both, or all parties concerned, manage to go to their true needs, I express my true need other through through their common humanness, or through the way that they actually share one heart which knows how life feels from the inside, suddenly, and that's actually a magical moment, suddenly have the need to let the other experience their deep needs. So there comes a point, there comes a place beyond right or wrong, as Rumi would say. There comes a place where suddenly the person who really made you angry, and suddenly is being able to see, you can see them through your heart, and then you actually want this person to realize these needs. And then you're at the point where you just have to agree on the terms. You're really far away from conflict. You really have to, okay, this is your need, this is your legitimate need, I really feel your need as mine. That's empathy. I feel this need as I would feel it, and I want you to realize this need, and let's see how you can realize this need while I realize my need. Let's see, let's start negotiating, but without accusation, without judgment. So I have experienced this. So that's actually a very, very clean and cleansing practice, in order to come to this place where life and the desire to give life to somebody else manifests. Suddenly people who were just quarreling before, they have this mutual interest in making the other more alive. I mean, it's totally amazing. It's really amazing. That can't be done like this. You need training in this. You need to want to do it, but it's absolutely wonderful. It's like there is then in the heart there is this secret healing power of the source of life, which really wants to give life. It really wants to give life. Yeah.
Thanks very much for sharing your wisdom, your wise words. And with this, we are already at end of our podcast. And do you have any last thoughts to share?
I'm very happy that we could have this conversation, Sanjeev. Really, really,
Thank you.
it was really a profound experience. So thanks from my heart for you to you for providing this, for holding this space.
It was also a pleasure for me. It was means I'm grateful that you were able to join me and brainstorm together and help me on adding on my definitions and also giving some new perspective towards love and ego. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have done it without Indian philosophy on both sides.
Indian philosophy is Indian philosophy, but when it comes to physics, physics is more universal.
Yes.
And if now quantum physics is saying something and it's indicating towards principle of oneness, then I think everybody in the world should start taking it seriously,
Yes.
and people should just strive for real things which they feel is real, rather than going behind some illusionary goals or illusionary ego.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah,
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much for coming to my podcast.
likewise. Yes, thanks for having me here. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my podcast. If you enjoy it, please do not forget to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, you can always follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn link is available in the description of this podcast.